Welcome everyone. Today we are going to break down the entire history of the world of Splatoon. We'll be covering everything from the end of humanity to the Great Turf War, all the way up to the final Splatfest. Let's waste absolutely no time and get right into it, but before we go, real quick, if at any point you start to enjoy this video, it would mean the world to me if you left a like and considered subscribing. Alright, let's go. The story of Splatoon actually starts out in our time. Constant civil war and world wars lead to the destruction of Earth. The amount of civil wars that happened before the Great Flood is unknown, but we do know that there are 3 more world wars, World Wars 3, 4, and 5. Somewhere in this time, Judd is born and was so good at judging things that human militaries would use him to determine where they would need to launch attacks. For some reason, the printer that produced Splatfest themes was made. We don't know its original purpose though. In this timeline, global warming becomes much worse and out of control than it ever got in our timeline. For reasons unknown, one warring nation dropped a nuclear warhead on Antarctica, melting the entire ice cap. This is very important to note because today's humanity in our timeline doesn't have a warhead powerful enough to totally melt Antarctica with just one warhead, which means this humanity primarily devolved revolving around war, which is seen with their 5 world wars. But their technology for warfare so far surpassed us that it was able to melt all of Antarctica with one warhead. And with humanity having such powerful weapons, so powerful enough to completely destroy Antarctica, this could possibly be the reason why the Splatlands is the way that we see it in the Splatoon 3 trailer. The nuclear bomb going off in Antarctica set in motion the total and utter destruction of humanity. Before its destruction, Judd is frozen in cryosleep by the brilliant professor who may be responsible for the creation of the Splatfest printer. Judd was the cat of this professor, so he had an emotional connection to the cat. He wanted to preserve it. We are shown the professor being frozen in cryosleep as well, but his current whereabouts are unknown. So a few people are put into cryosleep, the world floods over, humanity dies in the billions. The age of humanity is officially over. For just about 10,000 years, there is no recorded evidence of sentient life on Earth. 2,000 years prior to the events we play through in the Splatoon series, the Mollusk Era starts. The waters that had flooded the Earth and killed off nearly all mammals and led to a massive boom in aquatic life had begun to recede, forcing aquatic life out of the many much larger oceans that had formed back onto land. The first of these beings being the squids. They rapidly evolved to live on land. Other envious sea animals such as urchins, jellyfish, and so much more evolved to need to stay out of the water and to go back on land. However, the most notable species, next to the Inklings, are the Octarians, which seem to have evolved in multiple ways, some being less intelligent than others. However, the most notable of the Octarians to evolve out of the ocean would be the Octolings, which evolved very similarly to the Inklings. Around the time the Inklings and Octolings became sentient, the professor's cat Judd awoke from his 10,000-year cryosleep. It's unknown if the professor survived his cryosleep, as we haven't seen him since he entered the cryopod. It's important to note that Inkling society didn't just jump between leaving the ocean to the massive cities we have like Inkopolis. They had more primitive societies in between, the main society of note being an ancient Egyptian-like society. In this society, we know that they worshipped Judd, and a sarcophagus can be seen in Schellendorf Institute that appears to be an artifact of the society. Another important note of the society that the Inklings had is that the Inklings appeared to have splatter shots, which brings into question how built into Inkling culture is warfare, and this question will become relevant very quickly. The opposing society to the Inklings, the Octarians, stayed to themselves relatively, but did have a good relationship with Inkling society for a while. At some point, the tide started to rise again and covered large chunks of land. Race relations between the Inklings and Octarians started to break down over time, as tensions about with drinking land began to rise. The tension eventually boiled over into one of the deadliest, absolutely most horrifying wars the history of Earth has ever seen, the Great Turf War. It's important to note that turf wars didn't originate from the Great Turf War. The ancient Egyptian-esque Inkling society is shown to having turf wars that got judged by Judd. However, the turf wars we participate in are not the same types of turf wars that took place in the Great Turf War. These were large-scale battles for undetermined amount of time. Most other species sided with the Inklings. The official story is that Inklings were devastated during the first year of the Great Turf War because they couldn't wake up on time, and that the Great Octo weapons, which fun fact are some of the bosses we see in hero modes, devastated Inkling platoons and did a serious number against the Inkling forces. The Inklings won in the second year after the formation of the Squidbeak's platoon. Hey, that's the name of the game! Consisting of Captain Cuttlefish, the leader, Moses Schellendorf, Sheldon's grandfather, the weapon maker, and 2 other unknown Inklings, and Judd. Inklings had, quote-unquote, won the Great Turf War because they had more tentacles. However, when you look deeper into the lore, it gets much darker. We always hear about the Great Octo weapons, and the Octarians just wiping the floor with the Inklings. This may have been true at one point, because of what we see with the Octarians just bombing Inkling societies and attacking them with whatever this monster is. However, the Great Inkling weapons were much deadlier. This right here. This is an Inkling weapon of mass destruction. And I'd like to quickly shout out Rexicas for being the one that brought this to my attention, because without their iceberg, I would have never seen this. And it's amazing, and you should go check it out. The video's in the description. Moses Schellendorf also created a splatter shot that was so powerful that it could put a hole through a mountain. It's important to note that this splatter shot is most likely not shooting ink. I understand that when liquids like water or ink shoot out at certain pressures, they can put holes through some things that are pretty dense. However, we've seen that ink-based weaponry is usually used to shoot through walls, rather than just putting a hole straight through them. So Inklings beat the Octarians through some insane means, and we can definitely see that they don't really have any form of the Geneva Convention, because tensions between these two militaries didn't ever stop, and the weapons didn't really get any less deadly. So the Great Turf War ends with an Octarian defeat. The Inklings and their allies have total control over the surface, pushing the Octarians to set up a society deep underground, and Octarian-made caves, with kettles acting as access points into certain important caves. It's important to note just how big these caves are. These things are massive Octarian structures that make up just about everything underneath Inkopolis. Only one thing exists underneath Inkopolis that isn't belonging to the Octarians, and that will become very important later. The 2 major locations that the Octarians developed are Octo Valley, located underneath modern Inkopolis Plaza, and Octo Canyon, located around a mile away from Octo Valley, also underneath Inkopolis Square. Octarian Underground takes a lot of power to run. The Octarians use massive monitors to keep the underground locations looking more quote-unquote natural looking. They also keep producing Octo weapons, as well as making some seriously suspiciously designed goggles for the Octolings. That's an issue that hasn't come up yet. Octavio, the leader of the Octarians, pursues a career in music and becomes known as DJ Octavio, and for some reason doesn't leave his octopus form. For those who don't know, DJ Octavio is an Octoling. So the Octarians underground form domes. After about 60 to 70 years later, they start to show their age and run low on electricity sources, but they don't directly jump to addressing this issue. Instead, they create an invention, the Octolite goggles. Made for hypnotization and mass control. These are placed on the Octolings due to their heightened evolution and self-awareness. Standard Octarian Octotroopers don't need these, as they don't have problems with loyalty like the Octolings do. And the Octolings have these problems due to the militaristic dictatorship they live under. But for now, that's where the story ends with the Octarians. Pearl is born in the year 11,996, or 21 years before the events of Splatoon 2. Marina is born in 11,999, or 18 years before the events of Splatoon 2. They'll become important later. Callie and Marie are both born in 11,998, or 19 years before the events of Splatoon 2. Callie and Marie are cousins, who get their original burst of popularity in a youth folk singing contest in their home of Calamari County. Pearl also participated in a youth singing contest, where her powerful voice destroyed the contest. It is assumed that Pearl's youth folk singing contest was held in the reef in Inkopolis. The bridge in the reef used to be wooden, and we see this in the Splatoon 2 trailer, but in-game it's actually stone. This is because Pearl's voice destroyed the bridge. Pearl's voice will become an important part later. 16 years prior to the events of Splatoon 2, An Inkling who would later go on to take up the title of Agent 3 would be born in the year 12,001. A few years prior, an Inkling who would later take up the title of Agent 4 was born in 11,999. Finally, an Octoling who later escapes to freedom and becomes Agent 8 is born in 12,001 as well. Callie and Marie find a job hosting Inkopolis News, a hit newscast for Inklings looking to compete in turf wars, as well as getting jobs hosting Splatfest. Splatfests are competition over two topics. These topics are believed to be random, but are actually radio waves sent off by humanity, getting bounced back to the fax machine I mentioned earlier. Callie and Marie are the grandchildren to Captain Cuttlefish, the same war hero of the Great Turf War. Captain Cuttlefish dedicated his life after the Great Turf War to spying on the Octarians. If this sounds bad, don't worry. The Octarians treat the Inklings much worse. We left the Octarians' story in a pretty bad position. They don't have enough power, they're mind-controlling Octolings, they're desperate, they need to find some source of external power. Inkopolis is powered by beings called Zapfish. They have an alliance to the Inklings. It's not exactly sure what the Zapfish are getting out of this because it sure as hell is not protection. But the Inklings get power, the Octarians are aware that the Inklings are using the Zapfish. So with relations absolutely gone, the Octarians strike, steal many Zapfish from the Inklings, including the Great Zapfish, the main power source of Inkopolis. Captain Cuttlefish instantly becomes aware of this and heads out to Inkopolis Plaza to recruit someone to help him. He meets a young Inkling who he names Agent 3. Cuttlefish guides Agent 3 through Octo Valley to save Zapfish that the Octarians had captive. It's important to know that when we free the Zapfish, the Octarians are already exploiting them for energy. Agents 1 and 2 also help Agent 3 along the way. It's never officially said, but the story makes it very obvious that Agents 1 and 2 are Callie and Marie. When Agent 3 finally makes it to the Great Zapfish, it's sucked up by DJ Octavio and his Octobot King. Agent 3 fights back against the Octobot King and DJ Octavio's exploitation of the Great Zapfish, until finally Callie and Marie arrive in Octo Valley and perform the most influential song to ever exist on the planet, the Calamari Incantation. The song is so important because it's etched into the Inklings and Octolings' DNA. The power of the Calamari Incantation was enough to drive the Octolings' desire of freedom so through the roof that they gained the ability to take off the goggles and see the world for what it truly is. This caused all the Octolings in the radius of Callie and Marie to flee from Octo Valley in search of a new life. Switching back to the main Splatoon plot, Agent 3 was able to free the Great Zapfish, who returns to Inkopolis Plaza. DJ Octavio is captured and imprisoned. The day has been saved. Fast forward about a year, where a Splatfest appears that would put a pause on Splatfest for a certain period of time. This Splatfest making us question the functionality of how great the Splatfest really works. The theme of the Splatfest was Callie versus Marie, pitting Inklings against each other for 48 hours. The winner of the Splatfest being Marie, who won by 20 points. The conclusion of the Splatfest led to a non-dramatic falling out between the two. I said the Splatfest makes us question how Splatfests work, because Callie and Marie didn't exist when humanity was beaming signals into space. They just started to exist like 21 years before the plot of the game actually started. So if Splatfests are just signals bouncing back to the Great Fax Machine, then how did Callie and Marie get brought up to this? It's important to note that one of the Octolings saved by the Calamari Incantation is an Octoling named Marita Ida, an elite Octoling responsible for the protection of some of the Octolepins like Flutters. It's unknown how she fled Octo Valley, but after her escape she eventually meets Pearl. Pearl has already been making her music career to a lackluster degree of success. She has an incredible voice but no one to produce a sound to sing to. Until she met Marina, who wanted desperately to make music with Pearl, who eventually agreed after hearing Marina's demo of Ebb and Flow. When they finally finished Ebb and Flow, it was a smash hit. The boom in popularity gave Pearl and Marina the opportunity to run the Inkopolis News in the developing part of Inkopolis. The events of the final Splatfest brought Callie and Marie to new fame that they had never experienced before. After releasing their first solos, they began to drift apart. Callie began to spend most of her time filming late-night shows, often putting her in a position that she would not be able to return home until late at night, or if return at home at all, till the next day. Marie became a regular to music shows and her own concerts, and at one point had her own talk show. On a day off, Marie, while doing chores at home, began to wonder how Callie truly felt about losing their Splatfest. She has always believed that she didn't really care, but began to doubt the notion. She believed that Callie could be holding her loss against her. Callie one morning was awoken by a call from her manager, informing her that there was a delay in the recording schedule due to a different performer coming in. Callie decided to make the most of her time and try to find Marie to invite her to go do something. She found out Marie was eating with Krusty Sean. When she heard them talking to each other so gleefully, she decided not to intervene and to just let them keep talking without joining in. Callie headed back to their shared apartment, alone. Marie had found Callie early at morning making breakfast and was invited by Callie to go out shopping. She agreed. They went shopping together in Arowana Mall together before, getting some food to eat. While together, they talked about work and what they'd been up to with how busy they've been. However, deep in their minds, they were both worried about each other. Callie decided to tell Marie that she'd seen her talking with Krusty Sean, which Marie was taken off guard by hearing. However, they had soon gotten back to gossiping about people they knew. Sheldon had been busy preparing a new spot for a location that had been rapidly developing in Angopolis. Eventually, they had both realized they hadn't seen Captain Cuttlefish in quite some time. They didn't worry about him, as they believed that there was no harm due to the Octarians being defeated, but little did they know what he was really stepping into. They ended up talking the whole day away, and when they realized it was getting late, they decided to head home. Marie was packing her clothes, preparing for a trip to head to their hometown of Calamari County. She decided it was a good idea after learning of having 3 days in a row off. Callie was invited to go too, but she couldn't. She had a show that she had to get to. After leaving the train station off to Calamari County, the loneliness of leaving Callie behind began to set in. When Marie got home and eventually saw her parents, she was quickly reminded of how much she loved her small town home. Eventually, Marie's parents started to ask questions about Callie, which at first Marie was fine with talking about, but the more the questions came up, the more anxious Marie grew for Callie. The questions she asked about Callie led to Marie to the conclusion that she had no idea how Callie was doing at all. She was eventually able to calm herself down and fall asleep. Marie was waiting at the station for Callie to arrive, but when the train pulled in, Callie was nowhere to be found. Marie convinced herself that Callie had just overslept again and missed the train. She waited for Callie to get off the next train. She didn't arrive. She waited for hours, but Callie still didn't arrive. Marie called Callie's office and was told that she had headed straight home from work to their apartment. Her office had informed Marie that Callie left the office frustrated, but believed that this could be due to the fact that she wanted to go off to Calamari County. She called Callie several times but no answer. Panic took over Marie. She cut her trip short and returned to Angopolis the following morning. She spent the whole 3-hour trip on her phone, searching for any clues as to where Callie could be. When Marie arrived, she took off to her apartment. When she got there was no sign that Callie had been working there. After having an idea of where she could be, she rushed out of the apartment to continue to search for Callie. She rushed to Octo Valley to look for Captain Cuttlefish, but found no sign of him. Marie looked over and beheld the horrific sight of the snow globe that had held Octavio captured, shattered. Marie left Octo Valley in complete distraught over what she'd beheld, but when she got back to Angopolis, there was shrouded in news of the great Zapfish being once again missing. The people of Angopolis believe that the great Zapfish would once again reappear shortly after its disappearance, like it did the last time, but Marie knew what this truly entailed with the Zapfish being gone. Her suspicion led her to believe that Octavia was once again responsible. Captain Cuttlefish wasn't here to help her this time. To start this mission, she was all alone and would need to figure it out by herself. It wasn't long before the people of Angopolis realized that Callie was missing too. With all eyes on Callie and the great Zapfish, the burden was placed on Marie to solve the issues facing Angopolis. Marie decided to do what Captain Cuttlefish had done 2 years prior, look for a recruit to help take down the Octarians. But due to her immense popularity after winning the Final Fest, Marie would now need to keep a low profile as to not let too many people know about the new Octarian threats that the place faced. She decided to start her search in a new part of town that Callie had told her about, Angopolis Square. Before Marie could find her new agent, an unknown creature named Mr. Grizz opens up a, for lack of better words, shady operation called Grizzco. Grizzco was made on the surface to quote-unquote create a better future for Inkopolis. What Grizzco actually does is hire quote-unquote egg collectors to march out onto deserted lands to encounter the Salmonoids. Salmonoids are the evolution of salmons in our world, who every 70 years, for I believe the reason of breeding, migrate. They, however, evolved much differently from Inklings and Octolings. Their culture worships death and eating themselves. They see being eaten by another creature to be one of the greatest honors a soldier can have. They carry unconventional weapons such as frying pans to the battlefield, rather than ink-based weaponry like Inklings and Octolings do. What I just described are normal salmonoids called chum. However, the more important salmonoids are the boss salmonoids. It's unknown how some of the different what appears to be species, like moths and steelhead, fit into salmonoid biology. However, the most notable boss salmonoids, lore-wise, are the ones seen piloting different contraptions like steel eel and the scrapper. These are made of repurposed Octarian technology. This is possible due to an alliance between the salmonoids and the Octarians. The Octarians give the salmonoids some of their technology in exchange for some of the salmonoids' power eggs. This alliance between salmonoids and Octarians has little to do with why Grizzco is interested in the salmonoid. The interest in salmonoids comes from what the boss salmonoids carry, their golden eggs, something so important to salmonoid society that it's off limits for trade with the Octarians. However, Inkling society has no such trade agreements with the Octarians, so as long as the contact with salmonoids is permitted, which it appears to be in Grizzco. Side note, it's illegal for citizens of Inkopolis to have contacts with salmonoids unless it's given permission. It's unknown if Grizzco has the specific permission, which is one of the many reasons why it's as shady as it is. Mr. Grizz hires Inklings to go out into Salmonoid territory, kill Salmonoid, and make off with their golden eggs. The more golden eggs, the higher the rank and the higher the pay. It is unknown how Inklings interfering in salmon runs is affecting Salmonoid population, but it appears that we are slowly wiping out a nice chunk of their population every salmon run. Back in Inkopolis Square, Marie eventually finds an Inkling willing to help her find Callie and the Great Zapfish, who she deems Agent 4. Along with Sheldon, Marie guides Agent 4 through Octo Canyon, another region of Octoling territory. It's important to note that Agent 4 encounters Octolings still under hypnotic control, but this time using Octoling shades rather than Octolite goggles. The shades appear to be maybe a new model that are possibly stronger and can resist the Calamari incantation. Every time Agent 4 clears through a sector of Octo Canyon, a mysterious voice tells Agent 4 and Marie to turn back. Over time, Marie begins to figure out that this voice is Callie. Finally, the story concludes with Agent 4 confronting DJ Octavio and Callie. When Agent 4 rushes to meet Callie, DJ Octavio reveals to us that he had hypnotized Callie for what I believe to be a plot to get more Inkopolis citizens to sympathize with the Octarian cause. Agent 4 is left by herself to fight off against DJ Octavio's Octobot King 2, once again being powered by the Great Zapfish against its will. Marie and Sheldon eventually find their way to this confrontation. Marie armed with a hero shot charger with a mysterious ink called Low Tide ink. It's unknown how this ink works, but apparently it can help with memory loss and recovery. Marie hijacks the Octarian speakers again and starts to play a new remix of Calamari Incantation called Spicy Calamari Incantation. The remix quickly brings Callie back to her senses. The Squid Sisters, back together, help Agent 4 defeat Octavio once again. Together they take him down and reunite Octavio with his prison snow globe. The Squid Sisters reunite and create a new song called Fresh Start. During the exact same time as the events of Splatoon 2, Agent 3 and Captain Cuttlefish are out on patrol in Octo Valley. where they run into a lone Octoling. The Octoling and Agent 3 break into a fight. An unknown party captures Agent 3, Captain Cuttlefish, and the Octoling. Captain Cuttlefish and the Octoling wake up next to each other after being knocked unconscious. Unknowing of where Agent 3 is, Captain Cuttlefish and the Octoling agree to team up and break out of whatever they've gotten themselves into. When they get out of the first chamber they're held in, they find themselves in a giant subway, the only thing being there being a lone ringing telephone. The Octoling answers the phone, which reveals itself to be a guide to sea creatures looking to enter a place called Promised Land, which is assumed to be Inkopolis. But before the telephone can bring the Octoling and Cuttlefish to the surface, they would need to complete a series of tests to find what the telephone calls the Four Things, and only then can the telephone bring them to the Promised Land. The telephone then gives the Octoling a CQ-80 device and dubs the Octoling Test Subject 10,008. Captain Cuttlefish, however, doesn't like this name and chooses to call her Agent 8, or 8 for short. After all instructions have been given to the pair, a train pulls into the subway station. The train is called the Deepsea Metro. When Agent 8 and Cuttlefish board the train, they meet an intelligent sea cucumber, appropriately named Sea Cucumber, who instructs Agent 8 on how to use the CQ-80 device. After their introduction, they manage to stumble into contact with Pearl and Marina, who after hitting it off with Captain Cuttlefish in a rap battle, decide to help Agent 8 and him escape the Deepsea Metro and return to Inkopolis. So together, through mostly Agent 8, they track their way through the Metro, controlled by the CQ-80, to venture into every test site. After every test site is completed, Agent 8 earns a mem cake. A mem cake is the physical manifestation of one of her lost memories. Agent 8 lost her memories when she had entered the Deepsea Metro after getting knocked out by the unknown assailant. Some of the train lines that the Deepsea Metro travels down contains one of the four things that her and Cuttlefish need to escape to the Promised Land, so they head to every train line that has one and passes every test, which leads them up to the third thing being collected. At this point in the story, Cuttlefish starts to get very concerned with Agent 3 not being there, so he decides to draw a missing poster for Agent 3. After they collect the fourth thing and bring it to the telephone shoots off its pole and pulls the four things together to create a device that will take them to the Promised Land. The telephone then invites the two into the device, where Marina asks the fatal question. Wait a second, is it just me? Or, does that thing look exactly like a blender? The blender then closes and locks 8 and Cuttlefish inside. Marina desperately tries to shut down the blender, but to no avail. Her last attempt is to send a distress signal out to anyone who can get it, and within a few seconds, Agent 3 bursts through the ceiling and destroys the blender and knocks over the telephone, and frees Agent 8 and Cuttlefish. Pearl and Marina agree that it's best for Agent 8 to go through the hole created by 3. This leads 8 through a huge structure laid out and named after human biology. The first phase being the coccyx phase. In this phase, she must avoid all enemies as she has no weapon, and if spotted, the enemies will attack her and swarm her. She successfully breaks free from the coccyx phase and enters the Villi phase, where she tricks a sanitized Octo trooper into leading her to splat bombs, which then leads her into finding an Octo shot. Having found a weapon, Agent 8 leaves the Villi phase and heads into the Belly phase. The Belly phase is the most disturbing of all. In this phase, we see the creation of the sanitized Octarians. Agent 8 is forced to use their containment cells as a way to break free from the Belly phase. She eventually finds herself in the intestinal phase, where she must dodge security lasers to find a power core to activate an elevator to the surface. Her journey through the intestinal phase leads her to the power core she was searching for inside of the diaphragm phase. In this phase, Agent 8 hits several blocks holding down the power core, which appears to actually be a zapfish. 8 takes the power core into the peristalsis phase, where she protects the power core from destruction by the sanitized Octarians. After plugging in the power core, the elevator she had been searching for is activated. Agent 8 begins her ride up the elevator, but runs into Captain Cuttlefish held against his will by the partially sanitized Agent 3. Agent 3 and Agent 8 fight a vicious battle up the top of the elevator, but the battle eventually concludes in Agent 8's victory, unsanitizing Agent 3. The elevator leads 8 to the ladder, which leads to the real Promised Land, Inkopolis. When 8 and the gang scale the ladder, they find themselves atop a huge statue, waiting to be picked up via helicopter from Pearl and Marina. Captain Cuttlefish and 8, along with the still unconscious Agent 3 from earlier in the fight, board the helicopter. As Pearl and Captain Cuttlefish break into a rap battle, Marina notices something. The statue 8 and Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3 escape from has begun to rise out of the water, revealing the NILS statue, ran and controlled by the telephone, who reveals himself to be Commander Tartar, a sentient AI created by a brilliant professor who literally can't be anyone else but the professor that made the Splatfest printer and put Judd and themselves in cryosleep. He announces that he had made a primordial ooze made up of the grounded remains of test subjects that had completed his test, and that he wants to use it to sanitize the whole world and create the perfect life form, as he despises Inklings and Octolings over their wars over what he considers trivial ideas. Marina figures out a way to stop the statue from firing the primordial ooze. The statue is solar charging, so if they stop the statue from charging in 3 minutes, it wouldn't have enough energy to destroy the world. So to stop it from charging, they would need to cover it in as much ink as possible. To cover a statue that big in so much ink, they would need help from Marina's hyper bombs. With their plan made, Agent 8 launches onto the statue to cover it in ink. Agent 8 activates all of Marina's hyper bombs that are launched onto the statue and succeeds in covering it all in ink. After the job is done, Marina learns that the statue still intends to fire, with enough capacity to destroy Inkopolis. However, Pearl comes in to save the day. Remember that super powerful voice she has? Well, she's also got a super powerful killer whale, powered by her voice to go alongside it. As soon as the statue starts firing, Pearl fires back with a loud... Their beams cross, and Pearl's overtaking Tartar's, destroying the statue and killing Tartar in the process. The characters reunite together and bask in their success of saving the world on their way back to Inkopolis. Canon-wise, after Octolings start entering Inkopolis, a Splatfest is decided that pits squids and octopi against each other, this being the first Splatfest that Octolings actually participate in as a whole. A year later, it's announced that the Splatfest printer would once again stop with one more final Splatfest. This final fest being Chaos and Order against each other, Chaos being the side chosen by Pearl and Order being the side chosen by Marina. Pearl tells Marina that she's invoking Splatfest Law Article 4, meaning the loser has to live in the world of the winner's choosing. The Splatfest lasted 3 days, and the Squid Sisters came back to make more music in it with Off the Hook for this final Splatfest. The final fest concluded with Chaos being the winner, beating Order 3-0. Pearl tells Marina that the only chaotic thing she wants was for Off the Hook to break into more music genres, and that there's nothing that could ever happen to them that could ever break them up. Things remain peaceful in Inkopolis until around a year and a half later, where Off the Hook decides to have another Splatfest after the final Splatfest. The Splatfest is important to Splatfest lore due to it being unknown if the Splatfest fax machine actually came up with the topic due to something Marina said about the Splatfest. This Splatfest is Super Mushroom versus Superstar. Splatfest ends with the Super Mushroom victory. Years later, after the final fest, Inklings and Octolings mass migrate to a new place called Splatsville. Splatsville is located far away from Inkopolis inside of another region called the Splatlands, a vast desert. Splatsville is nicknamed the City of Chaos, this being attractive to the citizens of Inkopolis due to the Chaos victory in the final Splatfest. We don't know much about this location, but we're sure to learn more in the future when we get our hands on Splatoon 3. Alright everyone, that has been the Splatoon timeline, covering everything from the beginning of Splatoon up to where we are now. If you'd like the timeline, please give this video a like and subscribe. And yeah, I know I didn't cover stuff like splat bands and such, but that's because there's just so much lore surrounding just them that I've decided that eventually I'm going to make a video just covering the splat bands and other stuff that just didn't get big enough to be mentioned in this timeline. But anyways, that is it from me, and I will see you people later.